Boo! Yes, it's the final week of October, which means we have the World Series, college football, the NFL, NHL action, the NBA, UFC, soccer, and let's not forget about that college basketball right around the corner. Since we're almost obliged to have a Halloween commercial, let's make it a scary good one. Until midnight on October 31st, no costume is required to get a 31% discount on one all-access package of your choice at both Wager Talk and Sports Memo using coupon code BOO31 at checkout. This coupon will save you over $12 on a one-day all-access that includes any 5% plays. And it'll also save you over $18 off a 3-day all-access. Or why not go big and save over $90 off a 30-day all-access? Or perhaps take over business for the next year by saving over $600 with a 12-month all-access package, coming out to just $3.77 per day for the next 365 days. Coupon code BOO31 expires at midnight on Halloween. But remember to use it wisely, as this coupon can only be used once at Wager Talk and once at Sports Memo. From my friend and I, happy Halloween.
Welcome into the best damn college football show out there. I am Drew Martin, and joined by two of the best handicapping minds in the business and two friends, Robbie Veno, Ralph Michaels, as we're ready to break down three games, arguably the three best games on the slate: Kentucky, Tennessee, Cincinnati, UCF, Florida, and Georgia. Going around the horn here. Welcome them in, Ralph Michaels at Cal Sports LV on Twitter. Check him out, wagertalk.com. Ralph, welcome in, man. How you feeling?
Doing great, Drew. I want to thank you for bribing Chris to give us this slate of games to talk about. I do have a quick special I want to mention. What a couple-week period. World Series, NFL, college football, NBA, NHL, and in the first Monday of November, college basketball starts. The only time where we get all six of those American sports and save $100 off a 30-day all-access Flash 100, FLASH 100. You'll get a 30-day all-access for just $199. All those sports under $50 a week.
Great specials there, Ralph. Check them out. Ralph Michaels, Rob Veno, Drew Martin, wagertalk.com. We got Robbie Veno with us at Rob Veno Sports on Twitter. Rob, I know you're excited, man. Welcome in.
Glad to be here, guys. Wednesday's always one of the best segments of the week for me. Ralph, I noticed that pen of yours is promoting something. Is that from the doctor's office or the dentist? Or it's got text on it?
No, I gave these out at the meet and greet. It says, Ralph the Pen Michaels, Wager Talk Stat Daddy.
Oh, man, that's beautiful. I missed.
Oh, nice.
All right. Very, very nice. Yeah, Drew, great to be here. Like Ralph said, good slate of games. And, we'll look to provide the best info we can.
Absolutely. Let's get into it, guys. At the top here, Kentucky and Tennessee, SEC East battle. This is going off 7 o'clock in Knoxville. Ralph, coming to you first, man. 62.5 being the total. We're seeing the Vols anywhere between 12 and 13. I guess we can call it a consensus line of minus 12.5. Looking at the Wager Talk live odds screen, averaging 50 points a game, talking about this Tennessee offense. But Kentucky on the other side, they're pretty well coached, and they held Mississippi State to just 225 yards. What are you thinking here with the Wildcats and the Volunteers?
Well, under Stoops, Kentucky's been one of the best underdogs there is. Why? You have a running back like Rodriguez. You had a great offensive line last year. Had some issues this year. It still might have some issues, so we'll see it out. Will Levis takes care of the ball. He has 5 picks, a 13-5 ratio. But he doesn't seem to make stupid mistakes. A couple of those weren't his fault. So I look at Kentucky's defense. They've held 5 of their last 6 foes to a season low. And I'm not one that likes looking at stats. Instead, I like looking at how a team does relative to their opponent's averages. So when you're holding foes to a season low, that means something. What's Tennessee's low this year? They had 416 yards at Pittsburgh. That, of course, was on the road. And we've seen, Hooker jump to the top of the Heisman rankings, especially after putting up what he did against Alabama, 567 yards and 52 points. So the question is, do I think Kentucky's defense can slow Tennessee? I think they can slow them, but no one's going to shut them down. Do I think Kentucky's offense can move the ball against Tennessee? Tennessee's rush D is 91 yards and 2.9 yards per carry because they've done very well. but they did allow 141 to Florida. We've seen the Kentucky offense semi-struggle early. I talked about the offensive line and their issues. Last season, they had 25 sacks all year. This year, through 7 games, they've allowed 26. They've allowed more sacks through 7 games than they did last year. But let's remember, Rodriguez missed the first 4 games. Levis missed the South Carolina game. So all of that came to fruition last week with Levis back, with Rodriguez under pace, and we saw the offense rush for 239, 5.0, and gain 470 yards. So I've got a good home dog, Kentucky 11-2. ATS is a dog of 2 points or more. I have Tennessee with Georgia on deck. Again, that's the entire SEC championship looking them down the road. I've got a team where the road team has covered 3 straight in this series and 6 out of 7. So I believe Kentucky's a live dog. I haven't finalized these games, but there's a very good chance Kentucky makes it on my card this week.
Kentucky looks like plus the points, guys. Nearly 2 touchdowns here. Can get them as high as plus 13 right now as we're talking midweek. Robbie, coming to you next. I tend to agree here with Ralph, man. I think this this dog is barking. You know, the Wildcats, they just lost by 3 points last year. And to Ralph's point, he just brought it up. Kind of a look-ahead spot here for Tennessee. What are you thinking, Kentucky and Tennessee?
Yeah, well, I know venue should be hostile, not that Kentucky would be, or fall prey to a hostile environment, but you're talking about a night game in Knoxville, 7 o'clock Eastern time for that game. Half of Tennessee is on Central Time Zone, the other half on Eastern. Knoxville happens to be a part that runs on East. So you've got a night game in Tennessee, which could, it's a huge stadium and it's disruptive to opponents anyway. So that's something to have to overcome here. But a couple of things. Ralph talked about how good UK has been as an underdog under Stoops. They're already 3-0 against the spread as an underdog this year. They get Florida, they get Ole Miss, and they get Mississippi State. The only time Tennessee was a favorite, double-digit, against an FBS team all season long was against Florida, and they didn't cover that game, 38-33. Final score there. Florida gained 594 yards in that game. That's the second time Tennessee's defense has given up over 500 yards. So they're susceptible. It may not be against the run, although I would say this. I think when you look at opposing rush offenses that they've faced, they've had way more soft than strong. So maybe the numbers are a little bit skewed in that area. Kentucky's running game did finally show up last week against Mississippi State, ran it 48 times, got themselves 239 yards. Chris Rodriguez was not available the month of September, but even when he came back, Kentucky had not been running the ball well. They ran it well last week. We'll see if that continues against a team that's number 6 in the country, once again, in rush defense. So I think for Kentucky, guys, their pass offense has to show up here, and it might surprise a bunch of people to know that Will Levis actually ranks 7th in the nation in quarterback passer rating. Hendon Hooker, number 2. So you've got 2 of the top 7 in this game. And I had this thought after week 1, and I think it'll come into play here, that when I watched Kentucky, their very first game, I thought to myself, wow, their wide receivers are way better than I thought they were going to be. I thought when they lost Wan'Dale Robinson last year, Wan'Dale Robinson's like a once-in-a-decade type receiver for Kentucky. They don't generally have these explosive guys that break off big plays, and he even transferred from Nebraska. But then I saw this wide receiving core, and they look pretty good. They've continued to be pretty good. They're not used overly in this type of offensive system, but maybe they have to be used quite a bit here, and I think they can attack Tennessee. So from that standpoint, I think Kentucky has enough offensive firepower to get it done points-wise. But I do think they're going to have to score. For Tennessee, like Ralph said, I think you can contain them, but you can't stop them, especially the beginning of the game, guys. Josh Heupel's early game scripted plays seem to get to everybody. I think I talked about their first half statistics as far as totals are concerned a couple of weeks ago, and they just keep running on. I think they've scored 33 or better, 31 or better in 13 of their last 16 first halves. Not Tennessee alone, but I mean totaled. And this total is right at 31 and a half. I think it might be tough for Kentucky. They could probably adjust as the game goes on. Mark Stoops very good at that. But I think in the beginning, their defense might be taken aback a little bit by how explosive Tennessee is. I am sure that Mark Stoops has something devised, whether it be umbrella type to avoid long pass plays, whether it be drop 8 in coverage to take a bunch away. But Tennessee runs the ball real well. And even when they hit short passes, guys, they're capable of taking a 10-yard pass and turn it into a 60-yard gain with all these receivers that they have: Hyatt, McCoy, Kenyon, Cedric Tillman, a bunch of guys that can go the distance. So I see this thing somewhere in like the 38-27 range, which would put it slightly over and would make Kentucky a cover at this point spread. I could see both happening. I'd probably lean a little more toward Kentucky getting the point spread cover, just because it's what Mark Stoops does in these situations. And Tennessee's at, that one game against Florida where in this price range they couldn't get it done.
Stoops as a dog. It has been good. Money maker there. So, yeah, fun one. Either way you look at it, guys, in Knoxville, Saturday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We got 2 games left. Heading to Orlando, Florida for the next one, 3:30 Eastern here, Robbie. We get Cincinnati at UCF. This is a pick 'em price tag. And guys, actually, if you look at the Wager Talk Live odds screen, you can get either team right now as a +1 underdog, 56 being the total. Robbie, Cincinnati 0-4 against the spread. Their last 4 trips to the bounce house. Can they kind of break that trend here? What do you like in Cincinnati UCF midday on Saturday?
Yeah, you know what, Drew? Let's stick with the technical trends, right? I'm generally not one to spout off technical trends, especially when they're, dating way back 20, 25, 30 seasons. But let's just stick to the recent future, or to the recent past. Cincinnati this season, by the standard of straight up record and against the spread record, their results are obviously they're the most overvalued team in the country, right? It's a 6-1 straight up team that's gone 1-5-1 against the spread. And that's the pure definition of overvalued. Here, they don't have to lay hardly anything. This is a close to pick 'em game, but still they have been overpriced all season long. And who's to say they're not overpriced and why they might not have to be a dog here in this particular situation? You could give them a push in that Arkansas game if you want. Off the opener. I think if you got the first number, you probably got either a win or a push. But against closing number, they've been bad. They haven't covered an FBS team all season long. The only game they covered was against Kennesaw State, and that's an FCS team. So they've been bad against the point spread. Add to that they've only covered 1 out of their last 9 road games. And kind of piggybacking off of what you said, Drew, the home team in this particular series now 4-0, last 4 tries. So a lot of technical trends in favor of UCF here. So if we look at the fundamentals real quick, the UCF offense against the Cincinnati defense, my initial question is, can Central Florida run the football here? Because Gus Malzahn and that run-oriented spread has really tilted the play calling percentages in favor of the run. They're about a 60-40 run team. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that John Rice Plumlee is incorporated into the run game, right? Your quarterback plus your running backs run the football here. But the run heavy spread, Arkansas and South Florida each have a dual threat quarterback, KJ Jefferson, Jerry Bohannon. Each team ran the ball heavy against Cincinnati, and each team had pretty good success. Arkansas went 63.5% run play calling in that game, gained 224 yards rushing, 5.0 per pop. South Florida went 67% run in their game. Bohannon had a huge rushing game in that one as the quarterback, and they gained 224, 5.2 per carry. So it can be done against this defense. I think that in our minds, we view Cincinnati as this extremely tough line of scrimmage team. Not that they aren't that, but I don't think they are what they've been in the past, judged off of those 2 games here. You would expect John Rice Plumlee and the UCF ground game to be able to get something in that vicinity done here. Plumlee's the number 1 rusher on this UCF team. So certainly he's a big part of it. And surprisingly, he gets ripped for his passing. And I think sometimes you watch him and you think he's not a very good passer, but He's 38th in the country in passer efficiency, and that's not all that bad when you got 117 Division 1A teams or FBS teams. So actually been pretty good, and he's better than his counterpart. Ben Bryant's known as a drop back passer. Ben Bryant's 48th in the nation, so Plumlee ahead there. The UCF run defense gave up 226 to Louisville. That's the only really bad game they've had. Their overall run statistics defensively are really, really good. But in the game against Louisville, it was almost all Malik Cunningham. It was a Malik Cunningham show that night. They have the possibility in this game. They have the pieces to be able to, control Cincinnati's ground game a little bit. I think that helps. And the last thing I'll say here is Cincinnati has lived defensively off of sacks this season, 29 sacks. 17 of those 29, more than half, were in 2 games. 11 against Tulsa when Davis Brin played all banged up and couldn't get out of his own way, actually left the game a couple of times, and they put the backup in and he got sacked. So they had a big sack day there. And then last week they got 6 against Tanner Mordecai. Neither one of those guys all that mobile, not the way John Rice Plumlee is. I don't think that Cincinnati can live off of sacks here. I kind of like UCF at home here, Drew. I think they can win this thing straight up.
Interesting. I like your breakdown of Plumlee, Robbie, because I'm actually looking at the definition of passer rating and how it's calculated because of watching UCF, man, I can tell you where he struggles. He struggles throwing the deep ball, Rob, like hitting a guy in stride 30, 40 yards down the field. He doesn't put a lot of touch on that, and that's where he struggles. But I could see why in passer rating, it wouldn't show that as much because Gus Malzahn's offense is a lot more short passing, quick, where you can kind of get yak yards after it. So it does make sense that he wouldn't be that low rated in passer rating. Where I get after this handicap, Robbie, is can Cincinnati stop UCF's running attack? If they can, they got a real good shot. If they can't, I think UCF's going to win at home. That's what I think that this handicap is the main kind of, where you got to go with this in terms of picking the side winner. But Rob, great stuff overall. Ralph, let's get you in here, man. What are you liking in the bounce house? Big one in the AAC.
I'm going to make one correction on Rob. He said 117 FBS teams. There's, of course, 131. He was thinking back a few years ago. So when I had hair, Rob, there were 117 teams. I'm going to counter one of Rob's. Rob jumped on some technical situations, and he said he normally doesn't do that. Well, I went to the database, and this number surprised the hell out of me. Rob said that Cincinnati was overvalued because they were 5-1 straight up, 1-5 ATS. So does the line start getting adjusted? I went back and in the last 5 years, when a team has won 3 straight games but failed to cover each of those 3 games, they have actually gone 18-5, 78% in that next game. That is Cincinnati. That is also UTS this week, which has won 3 straight but failed to cover, a couple by a big margin. I'm not going to base a play on that with only a 23-game sample size, but it's something to think about that perhaps people are starting to jump off Cincinnati having failed to win money on them. Fortunately, last week, Cincinnati had been shooting themselves in the foot, minus turnovers in games, stupid penalties. I used them on the money line against SMU, and thankfully I did, because what happened? They had a 14-point lead late, and they made 3 or 4 stupid penalties leading to 2 SMU touchdowns. So if they don't correct that, they're done. The other thing, if you look at Cincinnati's offense the last 2 weeks, they've averaged 414 and 379. They've gained 414 and 379 yards. And I talked about using averages relative to a team. You may look at that number and say, well, 400 yards per game is damn good. I mean, that would rank in the upper part of the NCAA. But they played UCF and SMU. UCF has played 6 opponents. That was the 5th worst offensive performance they've given up. SMU's opponents, that was the 2nd worst performance they've given up. So Cincinnati's numbers, despite having 400 yards per game, were actually horrible. They were number 6 against SMU and 6 against UCF. So that puts their offense down a notch. Their defense has held 4 of the last 6 opponents to a season low. I go to the season lows. And UCF against a good Louisville defense, 339 yards. UCF against a Georgia Tech team, 333 yards. So, yes, I think they can slow them down. You guys said Plumlee was, 33? Hell, he had, 3 interceptions last week? It probably was in the top 15 or 20 prior to last week's game at East Carolina, where he had 4 turnovers himself, 3 interceptions and a fumble. UCF wants to run the ball because they're not going to force Plumlee to throw. I think Cincinnati can stop them. We know Cincinnati's going to try to run the ball. UCF holding foes to under 40 yards, 4.0 yards per carry. I actually like the under here. I still think there's a lot of pride. This is still basically for the for a seeding in the American Conference. I mean, UCF has 1 loss. Yes, Tulane's undefeated. But I think, at the end of the season, these 2 teams are likely to be there. Game, pressure, conference ramifications, I'm going to go under the total.
Going to be a fun one. Yeah, you can see why that atmosphere is going to be a big-time atmosphere in Orlando, Florida. Guys, we got 1 game left. Rob Veno, Ralph Michaels, I am Drew Martin. Let's head down to, over a little bit northwest of Orlando, Florida, to Jacksonville, Florida, as we get the Florida Gators and the Georgia Bulldogs here, Ralph. We're seeing Georgia more than a 3-touchdown favorite, 22.5. That number kind of popped out at me. Like, I wouldn't have thought it'd be that high. Not saying Florida should definitely be the side because of it. It just kind of surprised me. 56.5 being the total. 3:30 Eastern time, CBS SEC game. We get the Gators, who are just 1-3 in SEC games here, Ralph. And I know both the president of the University of Florida and the president of the University of Georgia don't like us calling it, but it is the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. So if you're cocktailing, what side you looking to bet here, Ralph?
Screw what they want. Kirby Smart has actually did some interviews saying he wants this game moved out of Jacksonville. So, we'll see what comes out of that. You look at Georgia's offense, what can you say? Again, I'm going to talk averages. Their numbers against opponent season's averages, number 1, number 1, number 1, number 1, number 1, number 2, number 3. And the number 3 was only because they had a 55-0 lead on Vanderbilt, and they didn't need to score anymore, else they would have put it more than 579 yards. Can Florida stop them? No. Can Florida slow them? We'll see. Florida's defense has been sieve-like, allowing over 225 yards rushing 3 times. In those games, 5.4, 5.9, and 6.2 yards per carry. Georgia almost 200 yards a game, 5.6. How about this for a matchup? Florida's defense, number 130 out of number 131 in third down conversions. Georgia's third down offense, number 2. So we have the second best against the second worst. Georgia's going to be able to hold on to the ball. I break down the game, and Georgia, you're off a bye, so you're not going to look past the cocktail party, but you do have Tennessee at home next week. So if they get the big lead, are they happy with a 24-point lead in the fourth quarter with 6 minutes left? And do they bring in Carson Beck and get Bennett out so he doesn't get banged up for Tennessee? I can clearly see that happening. Can I trust Anthony Richardson? No, he's got a 6-7 ratio. And against this Georgia D, this Georgia D is not like the other Georgia Ds, though. They only have 7 sacks on the year. So they don't get pressure. So Richardson's not going to be quite as pressured. He's the number 2 rusher. He's had the most, he's had 56 carries. The leading rusher's had 59. So he runs as much as the leading running back, just trailing the leading running back with 7.1 yards per carry. I'm gonna just go out on a limb just to give you an opinion on this game. I'm gonna lean first half Florida. I think Georgia tries to establish the rush. I think Georgia, once they start getting some drives and get third downs, they may pull away from this team. But I think Richardson early in the game can surprise them a bit to perhaps get an early score. And remember, even though the line's 22.5, the first half line is very advantageous if you want the dog, because you're getting 13.5. It would be very nice to get 14, but we're not getting there. So Richardson played in this game last year. Both quarterbacks played. Richardson actually had an 0-2 ratio, threw 2 picks against him, but that gives him at least some time on the field against this team. I can't fade Georgia, even though I would like Florida, but I will lean with Florida to keep it close early and take that 13.5.
Good stuff, Ralph. Robbie, this is a fun handicap, man. 22.5, something, sports bettors love kind of going over. I don't know, a little bit of a look ahead spot almost, Tennessee on deck. I do agree with Ralph, though. It's not like they're going to overlook the cocktail party, especially because they had a bye week before. However, Florida had a bye week as well. So extra preparation time on both sides. Billy Napier, I know you remember from his Sun Belt days, he was great off of a bye. Can they stay within more than 3 touchdowns here in Jacksonville?
First thing I'm going to say is, if you are old enough to remember Buck Bellew to Lindsey Scott and Georgia beats Florida in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, then that's what you call it here in 2022. I don't care what politically correct people might want to call it. So that's what we'll call it. Second thing is, I'll just, again, I do these shows with Ralph, and I come with all these notes, and I'll take them and I'll just crunch them right now because I can't describe it any better than what he did. But I come up with a different play, guys. Everything that Ralph said, thoroughly agree with. I'm not going to rehash numbers. But I think we've had Florida on this show enough, or I've been on every game on the board with you enough, Drew, to have talked about Florida right away at the outset after week 1. What happened in the second half of that Utah game was a red flag immediately. Utah 4 drives, 302 total yards, should have had 4 touchdowns. It didn't turn out that way. It becomes a Florida win, should have been a Utah win. But you could see at that point this defense was not real good. And it's just continued and continued and continued. And it may be that Billy Napier just needs some new players infused into this roster before he can get it right. Because remember, he's a guy who was an assistant coach at Alabama and preaches the Alabama way. That's what he brought to ULL. That's what he's bringing here. I'm sure he'll get it fixed. But right now, they're not a good defensive team up against one of the best offenses in the country. And it doesn't matter how they want to attack you. Georgia will attack you via the run. They'll attack you via the pass. They're going to move the football on Florida. I agree with Ralph on the piece about Anthony Richardson. Do you trust this guy for 60 minutes against Georgia? No. Do you trust him enough to where he'll have a couple of flashes in this game, whether it be with his legs, whether it be with a deep ball? Yes. From that perspective, I feel like Florida can find their way to 17 points. I set Georgia somewhere in the vicinity of 42-49, or 42-45, right in there, which places me squarely on the over in this game. 56.5 just looked too low when I first saw it. For that to stay under, Florida basically has to play really good defense and almost, get held to 10 or less. I don't think either of those are going to happen. For Georgia, guys, it could be a look ahead. And I don't know how much this other factor means, but I know it has meant a small bit in the past. These college football playoff rankings come out next Tuesday. And what happens this Saturday could be a little bit of a deciding factor. Not that Georgia's going to fall out of the top 4. If they don't win impressively here, but not winning impressively could, move them off of 1 or 2, wherever these people might have them right now, and push them down to 3 or 4, where they'd have to build their way back. They could probably build their way back immediately with a win over Tennessee. But I still think that at this time of year, these types of squads, they want to win, and they want to win somewhat impressively if they can. Florida's going to come to play. Both teams are off a bye. I just think this game gets over because I think Florida can do enough with a couple of Anthony Richardson flash plays, and I think Georgia's going to play good offense and score points all game long.
Robbie Veno, Ralph Michaels, Drew Martin, best damn college football show out there, going around the horn here.
Drew,
best bets.
Drew,
final thoughts.
Before we jump around the horn, don't be pissed at me. I don't want you or Rob, MFing me behind my back. I had that Flash 100 special, $100 off 30-day. I just went in the back end at Wager Talk and added both you and Rob to that. So Flash 100 will work for Drew, Rob, or me, only available on this show, good through this weekend. Again, the only time where we got all these American sports playing at the same time is the next week and a half. So Flash 100, you guys are all set as well.
And what does it take off, Ralph?
$100 off a 30-day all access. So instead of paying $2.99 for 30 days, you're getting 30 days for under $50 a week.
Wow, like it. Well, thanks for that, Ralph. Benefit of being on here with the best damn college football show out there. Please smash that like button if you're liking the content. We got Roger Long in the house, RJ as well, Mountain Man, Schmidt in here as well, Vagabond Don, like that name, Vagabond Don. So, guys, going around the horn here, best bets, final thoughts for the show. We got Ralph Michaels at Cal Sports LV. Check him out, wagertalk.com. He just said the coupon code there, FLASH100, FLASH 100, taking $100 off, 30-day all access package. Good day to have this, guys. Good time of year to have this anyway. And Ralph, a good selection there. Ralph, if you got a best bet, throw it out, man. Final thoughts for the show. And are you really running with this stat, Daddy? Because I've been wanting to be able to promote you like that, but I don't want to kind of rub you the wrong way, so to speak, if you don't like that name.
Oh, no. I do a TNA segment on Bet On It every week, both college football and NFL. So Marco's been using that acronym for a while. So no question. And just to reach out, my son, who is Jeff Michaels over at Sports Memo, he's been sending me a trend each week, so we call him Stat Son. So Stat Daddy and Stat Son if you're catching the TNA on Bet On It. Simple for me, guys. I talked about it. If Kentucky has a chance to make my card, it's clearly going to be my best bet on the show. If you buy my all access package, you'll see if they did make it. In the last 3 weeks, I've had 5% play in football. That's it. It was a college football total that cashed a few weeks ago. I will have a 5% this Saturday as well. Don't spend $35 on it when you can get 4 weeks of all plays, all sports, $199.
Heard it there, guys. Ralph Michaels at Cal Sports LV, wagertalk.com. We got Robbie Veno as well at Rob Veno Sports. Again, Flash 100 works for him. Robbie, final thoughts for the show, and if you got a best bet, man.
Yeah, Flash 100. That's a prime example of why when Ralph Michaels is in your geographical area, you don't have him stay at a hotel. You open your front door and let him in and let him do what he wants while he's there. I was torn here, Drew. I had thought I could use 2 games that we talked about in this segment, but I'm going to go to the very last one I talked about. I really believe that Georgia's going to go for 40 plus in this game against Florida on Saturday. And I do believe that Anthony Richardson, especially with the week off, Billy Napier has had a chance to script some stuff early on. Ralph talked about maybe Florida first half. They've had an opportunity here to maybe hit Georgia with some things that their defense has not seen on film. Kent State scored 22 against Georgia. Missouri scored 22 against Georgia. Those 2 teams did not gain even 300 total yards. They benefited from some turnovers in those games. So I don't know how much you want to put that into, how much faith you want to put into those numbers, but I think Florida can get the job done. If they get to 17, I probably win. And I think that's going to be the case. And maybe Ralph is red flagging that 22 points.
I just want to add one thing. I was looking up as you were talking, Rob. Florida's lost to Kentucky. They lost 26-16. They were down by 3 at the half, 16-13. Their loss to Tennessee, they were down by 3 at the half, 17-14. Their loss to LSU, they were down by 7 at the half. So even in their losses that have been double digits, they've kept all of those 3 games within 7 points at the half.
And real quick, guys, I think we all believe that Billy Napier's a solid head coach. And those halftime scores right there would kind of indicate that something's going wrong with second half adjustments, or that he just doesn't have the personnel to stay in games second half. I would like to choose the latter rather than the former, because I don't think it would be Billy Napier's lack of adjustments that would cause Florida to fold in the second half of games. If they fold here, I think Georgia will keep their foot to the pedal.
Here's a thought on that, Robbie. I mean, that Kentucky game, I watched every play of that. I mean, comparing him against, Stoops, who's probably not, he's, in my opinion, one of the more underrated coaches in football. Plus the other one, LSU, Brian Kelly. I mean, X's and O's wise, he's probably up there among the best. And LSU, you kind of wanted to play LSU in the beginning of the season. Now they're a lot better team than they were in the beginning. And then I forget what the other one. Oh, Tennessee, they slipped through the back door and covered that game. So I don't know that I would penalize them too much for that. Also kind of something I was just thinking here with all of these games, like kind of rating the coaches against each other, Stoops and Heupel. I don't know. It's what makes me look towards the underdog there, towards Kentucky. And I know I said plus 13 is available. It's only available at one shop. It's really 12.5. I don't want to give out rogue numbers, but yeah, plus 12.5. That would be my best bet on the Kentucky Wildcats. And then also kind of rating Malzahn and Cincinnati there, head coach. And then, Florida, Georgia as well. It's like great head coaching matchups, guys. I don't know if you have any opinion on that, Robbie, like one head coach better than the other head coach in any of these matchups.
Yeah, I think I'm guilty of that at times, Drew. I mean, there's times, especially in the Big 12, I kind of lean on Mike Gundy in games where I think he's got coaching mismatches, and that could show up this week against Chris Kleiman if Kleiman doesn't have his players. So short answer to your question, absolutely. I think you have to look at coaching matchups in the college game, not so much in the pro game.
Yeah, I mean, Luke Fickell was the name I was looking for there against Gus Malzahn. Any quick thoughts coaching-wise on these three matchups, Ralph?
No, I tend to, I don't look at, when you have a double-digit line, like two of these games, I only look at coaches if they tend to pile it on late. Yeah. It certainly, when a game's between the threes, then I'm looking at it much more closely because you basically have a pick'em game. So where are the edges coming? You look at the matchups, and the coaching part is one of those check marks I give for matchups. When I have games between the threes and even between the sixes, I stretch it out in college football when I get into conference play.
Yeah, I like that. And just real quick here, Ralph, UGA, I'm not so sure on Kirby Smart, but I will say this: Josh Heupel, even going back to his UCF days, he will run it up if you give him the opportunity. So now that I think about it, maybe that's a way to look at Tennessee. No, Ralph?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, when you're trying to build like he was and you're trying to get rid of a reputation, you tend to want to get the following. When you're an AP number 3 and you beat Alabama, you don't need to do that. One thing I will say is that a lot of times I hear people do shows and say, well, they have a running team, so I don't want to lay a big number with them. Right. I actually prefer to lay a big number with a rush team because what happens when you get a big lead? You bring in the number 2s, you bring in the number 3s, and those same teams have practiced the exact same offense. If you have a pass team that's now trying to run the ball, your 2s and 3s are playing an offense that is unique to them. They don't practice that every time. And the other thing I'll say is this. Remember when you're laying those big numbers, when you're at home, you may have 110 kids on your roster, and you may play 3s and you may play 4s. When you go on the road and you're playing these conference games, you travel with 65 kids. So you bring your 1s, you bring your 2s, you bring your special teams, and you only have part of your 3s making it to the roster. So a road favorite to me, I'm much more apt to look at as well versus a home favorite laying those huge numbers.
Words of wisdom from Ralph Michaels. You heard from Robbie Veno as well. I am Drew Martin. Huge shout out to the chat box. Everybody joining us live. Can you please smash the like button? Also, feel free to reply below, guys. Any questions, we'll answer them on next week's show. Let us know what you're looking to bet, where you agree, where you disagree with us, anything else you want to throw out in terms of betting this weekend's games. Roger Long, shout out to you. We got Cap'n 101. Thanks for chiming in. Jake as well. Great show, guys. Listen while at work all the time. Well, Jake, hopefully you got your headphones in, didn't just blow you up there in front of your boss. But huge shout out to all of you guys. Ralph Michaels, Robbie Veno, I'm Drew Martin. We'll talk next week. Wednesday, guys. Best damn college football show. Cash those tickets.
Boo! Yes, it's the final week of October, which means we have the World Series, college football, the NFL, NHL action, the NBA, UFC, soccer, and let's not forget about that college basketball right around the corner. Since we're almost obliged to have a Halloween commercial, let's make it a scary good one. Until midnight on October 31st, no costume is required to get a 31% discount on one all-access package of your choice at both Wager Talk and Sports Memo using coupon code BOO31 at checkout. This coupon will save you over $12 on a one-day all-access that includes any 5% plays. And it'll also save you over $18 off the 3-day all-access. Or why not go big and save over $90 off the 30-day all-access? Or perhaps take over business for the next year by saving over $600 with a 12-month all-access package, coming out to just $3.77 per day for the next 365 days. Coupon code BOO31 expires at midnight on Halloween. But remember to use it wisely, as this coupon can only be used once at Wager Talk and once at Sports Memo. From my friend and I, happy Halloween.